Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Breaking news, a major development in the Russia investigation. A new court filing by the special counsel, Bob Mueller, claiming Paul Manafort lied to Mueller's team and the FBI repeatedly. Okay, and now here's the crucial point. After he pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. So after he'd reached this whole deal, he lies to Bob Mueller's team, he lies to the FBI. CNN Justice correspondent Jessica Schneider is out front. Jessica, I mean, this is hugely significant. What did Manafort allegedly lie about? And if this happened, what does it mean for this plea that agreement he'd entered into?
Yeah, Aaron, the plea talks at this point, they're over. And the lingering question here after this filing is what exactly did Paul Manafort lie about? The special counsel will only say that he lied on a variety of matters. And then in this filing, they say that they're going to expand upon exactly what he lied about in a future court filing. So remember that Paul Manafort, he's been working with Mueller's attorneys since he pleaded guilty to those two charges in Washington, D.C. back in September. But now the special counsel calling off the cooperation, saying in that filing just moments ago that Paul Manafort lied to the FBI, lied to the special counsel's office on a variety of subjects, and really now they're finished. No more talks, no more opportunity to cooperate, and they're ready for that federal judge to sentence Paul Manafort. You know, again, the filing doesn't really specify how he lied, what he lied about, but we know that Manafort has been meeting with Mueller's team for about 2 months now, and that was all in exchange for that possibility that they would ask for a lesser sentence on the two charges that he pleaded guilty to. One of them was conspiracy against the U.S., another conspiracy to obstruct justice because of his attempts to tamper with witnesses. And another interesting thing here, Aaron, on top of those charges, of course, Manafort was found guilty by that Virginia jury on 8 counts back in August. In that case, he faced up to 20 years on that conviction, and that sentencing was also on hold in that case. But now everything is off the table here. Mueller's team, they're calling off those future talks. They're saying to the judge, let's get right to sentencing. Manafort, meanwhile, his team, Aaron, saying that he was truthful, he didn't lie. But of course, now it's up to the judge to see how this moves forward.
Well, if that's really happening, then is CNN fake news? No, it's not fake news. It's really happening. And people are trying to figure out what happened. Is Paul Manafort stupid? Is Paul Manafort pathological? Is Paul Manafort keeping his mouth shut and never ratting on his friends because they've all decided to lie in one group, whereas the other group is cooperating? I mean, this is crazy. And are they all, keeping their mouth, you popped your cherry, but you did it right and you learned a valuable lesson. Keep your mouth shut and never rat on your friends. Is he doing that to get a pardon? See, no one seems to know the real answer to that question. There's another, little variable that's hanging out there. And that is Paul Manafort afraid of what might happen to him if he's released? Right now he's in solitary confinement in Virginia, and he seems to really love it. Perhaps, he loves it because he's talked to Julian Assange so many times about how to be a prisoner. I don't know. But, there were a couple of stories that just fell at the same time. And one of those was that the head of Russian military intelligence, the head of the GRU, suddenly died. He passed away. Some are saying it is mysterious. Others are saying, nah, he had cancer and he was going to die and don't think about it and it's not a conspiracy and what. And then at the same time, we got news that our former CIA director, John Brennan, had a stroke and was hospitalized and is now going through rehabilitation for a stroke. So you have the heads of two intelligence agencies that were pitted against each other, both, having real bad health problems. Just saying, all at the same time. Coincidence takes a lot of planning, is all I'm saying. He had the poisoning of the Skripals that became public, and so the head of the GRU also, remember that Bob Mueller indicted 12 Russian intelligence officers, 12 Russian intelligence operators who worked for the GRU and the hacking of the DNC. So apparently the head of the GRU was doing, let's say, a crappy job. And, Putin wasn't really thrilled with him. And then he got cancer and died. Is really, what went on there. But listen, I'll tell you, the speculation about Manafort, is it's really, a little bit insane because no one knows exactly why he's lying post plea agreement. And so now everybody is trying to figure it out, but they're not putting all of the available options on the table. And this drives me crazy.
How friggin' stupid is this guy?
Very frigging stupid. To get a cooperation agreement and the chance for a lower sentence was very important to him, especially since he's 70 years old. To throw that away, to throw that benefit away by continuing to lie to the special counsel's office is incredibly reckless and self-defeating. Now, in the filing today, Manafort's lawyers said they disagree.
He said there wasn't lying.
He wasn't lying, but the fact that the Mueller's office blew this agreement up in this way suggests they must have a pretty good reason for thinking that he's lying to them.
John Dean, I mean, if the conventional wisdom is, true and the collusion portion of the investigation is nearing an end, why would Manafort mess up a federal plea deal? You obviously have some experience with this. Does it make sense to you?
It makes absolutely no sense, Anderson. In fact, as alluded earlier, it's stupid. He's not going to get this opportunity again. It already appears he gave a lot of hours, 9 meetings, where he's obviously provided some things they could cooperate. He also has sacrificed not only his lessening his sentence potential, but they're not going to give back the $15 million of forfeited property that he's already been forced to give up. So this is just dumb, is what it is.
David, what's interesting to me about the lies, whether it's, Paul Manafort's lies in this case or the lies President Trump, often will tell, is that they are all dependent on, for success, on everybody else being stupid. And they're all dependent on the idea that everybody else who hears them is stupid.
No.
Clearly, the Mueller team is not stupid, nor are the American people when they hear repeated lies from the president that are easily checked. I guess I just don't understand the kind of low level of lying that it's just like really bad lying. And to get caught time and time again, as Paul Manafort has lying, is just incredible to me.
Well, it's not incredible to me, and I'll tell you why it's not incredible to me. It's not incredible to me because this was a guy who, while he was on trial, was witness tampering. Okay, this is a guy who is a good fella. There just is no question that they are like mob figures. They think that if they throw in with President Trump, that they will get, some sort of a pardon in the end. And so you got Corsi, you got Carter Page. Papadopoulos went to jail yesterday, but only for 2 weeks, right? He'll probably get, his record cleaned up. You got Roger Stone, who's saying that Corsi is being forced to lie, and Stone saying that he didn't know anything about Podesta's emails being released by Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, and it was just Corsi was such a brilliant conspiracy theorist that he actually stumbled upon the truth that, of course, the next tranche of documents that the GRU hacked would be Podesta's email. So you got this one group. You got Stone, Corsi, Carter Page, and Papadopoulos, who are continually going to lie along with Manafort. They're never going to tell the truth because they're all hoping for a pardon. Remember, Roger Stone has a giant, bigger than life-size tattoo of Nixon on his giant back. Okay? So this is what they're hoping for. But then everybody's forgetting about the other group. Who are the other group? You got Michael Flynn. You got Rick Gates, Paul Manafort's partner in crime when he was, all mobbed up in Russia. and you got Michael Cohen, the president's personal attorney, and Felix Sater. Everybody is forgetting Felix Sater is a cooperator. Felix Sater was the guy who was representing Donald Trump with Michael Cohen for Trump Tower Moscow, right? So you got this one group that's cooperating with Mueller, and then you got these other dudes who are like mobbed up. They're mafia people. They think like the mob. They act like the mob. They think that they need to keep their mouths shut. They think that they need to all, talk to each other about what lie they're going to tell. Everybody should tell that same lie and, never rat on their friends and get a pardon. Unfortunately, do you remember last week? I know it's very hard to remember. The tryptophan does something. Apparently, it has hallucinogenic properties, as you could tell by the president's own tweets on Thanksgiving and his own interviews on Thanksgiving about what he's thankful for himself. Right. So apparently the tryptophan has people hallucinating or forgetting or sleeping through this entire week. By the way, Mississippi, get woke right now. Go vote. Go vote. For Mike Espy. Thank you. But I have to tell you, last week, there was reportage. There was news about Julian Assange. Do you remember? There was an unrelated case that was about a child molester. It was really a gross case. But anyway, there was an unrelated case that was being filed in Virginia. And somebody in the prosecutor's office, by accident, copied and pasted one document to another. And what we learned was that Mueller has enough evidence to charge Julian Assange, but we don't know exactly what for. Do you remember that story? The Associated Press and other news outlets had reported that Assange is facing unspecified charges under seal. Mueller has those. And there was subsequently a debate in the court about whether or not it was in front of U.S. District Judge Leonie Brinkema, and they were trying to figure out whether or not Julian Assange, since that leaked, whether or not the whole indictment that's under seal should be released to the public. And the judge, after saying, this is a very interesting case, said, wait a minute, how do we do that if the man hasn't been charged, right? I mean, you can't get to him. He's in a diplomatic embassy. The Ecuadorians have him in an embassy in London. And that's Ecuadorian soil, and we can't charge him. We can't serve him. And so he's protected. And the court was trying to figure out whether or not to unseal the charges against Assange. Now, we don't know what they're for. But whatever they are means Mueller has enough to charge Assange, which means an entire investigation about the comings and goings of the people that visited him in the Ecuadorian embassy in London has been done. And the conclusion has been reached by Mueller's team that there is enough criminal activity on the part of Julian Assange beyond a reasonable doubt to charge him with criminal behavior. Everybody's leaving this little thing out going, well, they're forcing poor Paul Manafort to lie. And they're forcing conspiracy theorist and original birther and swift boater, Jerome Corsi, poor Jerry Corsi, poor Roger Stone. And those guys are all trying to blame everything on Randy Credico, my friend from the broadcasting and stand-up world, which is just ridiculous because Randy's too nuts. But let's not forget that there is enough evidence about Assange that Mueller has that he could charge Assange and did charge Assange, at least under seal, although we can't know because Assange is he's protected in the Ecuadorian embassy. Big detail. Nobody's talking.
All things Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, The Randi Rhodes Show.
the Guardian report says that Paul Manafort visited the Ecuadorian embassy and Julian Assange in March of 2016. This was around the time, as you and I both know well, you being on the campaign trail and us talking about this, that Paul Manafort was joining the Trump campaign or about to join the Trump campaign. We need a little bit more detail on those dates so we can be specific about it. In addition, the Guardian report says that Paul Manafort had other trips to the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and that those trips started around, I believe, 2013, if I remember the report correctly. You know, this raises some questions as far as what was the purpose of that? Why would he have met with WikiLeaks? I'm not sure that it points to anything that says that Paul Manafort was involved with the DNC hack, but it does raise questions as to why he would meet with them, and if for some reason that Paul Manafort was doing business with Ecuador as part of his political consulting business, why did he meet with them in the London embassy and not Ecuador's embassy, say, in the United States in Washington, D.C.? He had a house or has a location not far from Washington, D.C., so it does raise some questions as to the location and why specifically that embassy, which is, of course, where Julian Assange lives.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think this is a report that bears more follow-up at this point.
And just to explain some of the timeline here, you're correct, Tom. This apparently did begin in 2013. Sources have said Manafort, according to The Guardian, went to see Assange as recently as spring of 2016. According to one of their sources, it was in March of 2016. As you know, obviously, Paul Manafort joined the campaign shortly thereafter that.
Right. And what's really interesting is that they even know, the Ecuadorian intelligence agencies even know what Paul Manafort was wearing that day. They describe his outfit as being chinos and a cardigan with a light-colored shirt. So there's evidence that Manafort went to the Ecuadorian went to the embassy in London where Julian Assange lives and was, talking to him about WikiLeaks and using WikiLeaks as a disseminator of dirt on Hillary Clinton. Right after that trip, that is when Paul Manafort becomes the campaign manager of the Trump campaign. I mean, that looks good on a resume, right? Lobbied for every autocrat that I could think of, including Putin himself, who, by the way, digs you deeply and has dirt on Hillary Clinton. I can get it for you. Oh, and I'll work for nothing. Why? Because I owe Oleg Deripaska $10 million for a media plan that I never executed. He's suing me in the Cayman Islands. So I'm going to use you to forward this media plan that I promised to execute for him in order to taint the U.S. elections against Hillary Clinton because Putin fears Hillary Clinton. I swear to God, that was the reason. Now, I'd like to think that Manafort went to talk to Julian Assange only to ask him how it's like to live in prison. But that's not the reason. Why did Assange agree to do this? Assange agreed to do this because he wanted to damage Democrats. He believed Trump would be less likely to seek his extradition or possible charges of espionage after he received detailed information and printed it about the United States war efforts. Now, let's go even further back. Let's go back to the Christopher Steele dodgy dossier. Remember, Carter Page, the dodgy dossier. Let's go back. Let's go back to Christopher Steele's original dossier. In it, he names Paul Manafort. Oh, yeah, he names it. It's not a source E, which I believe is Felix Sater. Oh, no, it's Paul Manafort. He actually has a name in the dossier. He is identified and named. And he wrote that Manafort is at the center of a well-developed conspiracy of cooperation between the Trump campaign and Russia's leadership. The two sides have a mutual interest in defeating Clinton, whom Putin hated and feared. Why? Because when the people in the Orange Revolution got out into the streets and were complaining about making $450 a month while Putin and his oligarchs were taking everything out of Russia and giving it to themselves, Hillary Clinton told them democracy was a great thing and they should continue to protest freedom of speech and all that. And Putin has hated her ever since. because he has flashbacks to when he was a young KGB colonel and, people were trying to overthrow the Soviet Union back in the day. They were so pissed off at Stalin and they raided the people went and they, went to the KGB headquarters and there was a whole riot in the streets and Vlad was hiding in the KGB headquarters and vowing that he would put the old Soviet Union together again. And people will never have this kind of free speech and power to assemble ever again. And that's what he's been working on his entire life. But there was a memo that Christopher Steele wrote after the hacking of the DNC emails, after the publishing of those emails. He wrote, quote, this is Christopher Steele, he wrote, "The hacking operation had been conducted with the full knowledge and support of Trump and senior members of his campaign team." So that would mean Manafort and Gates. That would mean Jeff Sessions, okay? That would mean all these dudes over here, Flynn, the national security advisor. We're all cooperating, and Sam Clovis, too, all cooperating with Mueller, as opposed to the Jerome Corsis and the Roger Stones and the Manaforts and the, Carter Pages, right? And also add Felix Sater to the team cooperating with Mueller. This is where we are. And it turns out the dossier was correct. Now, we go to the Bible, which is Malcolm Nance. Malcolm Nance, The Plot to Destroy Democracy. We open the book and we read on page 38. You know, Malcolm, I'm probably the only person that's actually read your book. And yet, you let Stephanie hog the Nance. I understand she's got the weather, but it's a little smoky. All right, this is what he writes. Attorney General Jeff Sessions was found to have lied about meetings with Russians, including Kislyak, before his Senate confirmation hearing. Paul Manafort and Rick Gates, Trump's mafia consigliere-like campaign manager and deputy campaign manager, were both so under Russian influence, they were indicted for laundering funds believed to have come from pro-Moscow Ukrainian strongman Viktor Yanukovych. Keep that in mind, okay? Manafort was so uncooperative early on that the FBI carried out a pre-dawn raid on his home to secure documents that would lead to his charges. Gates would plead guilty. George Papadopoulos was charged with lying to a federal officer and pled guilty along with Michael Flynn. You know, George went to jail yesterday. Many reports would emerge about Trump's son-in-law and senior advisors willfully participating in schemes to get dirt on Hillary Clinton and unwittingly repeat the Kremlin's finely tuned propaganda. With all of this emerging evidence, Trump's daily refrain for almost a year was no collusion, no collusion, no collusion. Not only was America not going to do anything about the Kremlin's intervention in its affairs, it had two wings of the government dedicated to assisting them through inaction and disbelief. Okay, so everybody knows this, and we've known this for a really long time. It's just that the tryptophan has very strange memory wiping out properties, and so we have to relive and revisit all the facts that we know we have. The dossier, the very beginning of the Comey thing, right? Comey had to go to the White House and had to brief President-elect Trump. I believe it was on December 6th or 7th that the Russians were alleging that they had compromat on Trump, that there was a tape of prostitutes and him in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in the same room that Barack and Michelle Obama had stayed in, and that Trump hated Barack Obama so much that he had hired prostitutes to do a pee-pee show on the bed while he watched, and that it was videotaped, as most things are, in the Ritz-Carlton in Moscow. Ever since then, Comey was considered a persona non grata and somebody that Trump was looking to fire or gain loyalty from. And he had several meetings with Comey asking for loyalty. And now we know he asked everybody for loyalty. And that loyalty is what Trump prizes more than any other thing. And that Manafort might be giving him that. And Stone definitely is. And Jerome Corsi's probably been talked to by Roger Stone to do it too. Because Jerome Corsi last week was talking about being indicted, and this week he's saying, I'd rather spend my life in prison than tell a lie.
Corsi is telling people that he told people earlier this month, in fact, that he thought that he was about to get indicted by the special counsel's investigation because he had been asked questions about what he knew about WikiLeaks obtaining hacked emails that were hacked by Russian operatives from the DNC computer servers, including emails from John Podesta. Then he says that he has been offered a plea deal by Robert Mueller to give up what he knows about Roger Stone and others. You mentioned he's a confidant of Roger Stone in exchange for getting a lighter sentence. But Corsi says, hey, listen, I didn't do anything wrong, and therefore I am not going to plead guilty. But as we have seen in other cases, Michael Flynn in particular, you can resist only so long when you're looking at having to do things like sell your house and divest yourself of all of the assets that you spent a lifetime to build to pay for legal representation. So I think the final tale has not been told in the Corsi case yet, Shep. We'll keep watching it.
John Roberts reporting from the North Lawn.
All right, so that's the Fox News version of it, that Jerome Corsi needs to just lie, right? This is what they're going to peddle. Well, Jerome Corsi needs to lie because he can't afford to tell the truth. You know, you could only go so long before they take your house and your car. No. Here's the thing. You've got two groups of people, the cooperators and the pathological liars, or the good fellas. The good fellas have decided that they will never rat. They would rather wait and get a pardon from Trump. Okay. And the other guys are like, screw this. This man is so disloyal. It's loyalty with him is a one-way street. I'm getting out of Dodge. I'm going to tell the truth. I'm going to say what I know. I'm going to cooperate with Mueller. And that would include Felix Sater. That would include Rick Gates, Manafort's business partner. That would include General Flynn. And that would include Michael Cohen, his personal attorney. And that is quite a substantial group. Also, we now know that Mueller has enough to charge Julian Assange with something. What we don't know is with what. But we know what the dossier said about Paul Manafort. We know what that Julian Assange is in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. We know that Manafort has visited Julian Assange for about 5 years over and over again. Looks like the first time that Paul Manafort ever visited Julian Assange in the embassy in London was when he was lobbying for Viktor Yanukovych, the pro-Russia Ukrainian dictator. And it looks like that was about a year after Assange took refuge in the Ecuadorian embassy. And it looks like he went there to try and get some dirt from Julian Assange on Yulia Tymoshenko, who was running in an election against Viktor Yanukovych. And Moscow wanted to put Viktor in there in Ukraine, didn't want Yulia, who was a pro-democratic candidate, who was, a threat to Putin, just like Hillary was a threat to Putin. And they were looking to destroy her. And it looks as if Manafort was able to find so much crap that was actually crap to the point where, and help disseminate it so that Putin could, through Yanukovych, Putin could, through Ukraine, put Yulia Tymoshenko in jail. That did happen. And Manafort is probably responsible. And that's kind of where the lock her up thing came from. Well, we did it to, somebody that was against Putin before. We could do it again to Hillary Clinton. Get them to chant, lock her up. Get them to want to think that this woman, Yulia Tymoshenko, committed some crime against them. And that's what they did. So he had experience with this whole thing. Okay, and so he's visiting Assange in the embassy in 2013, 2015, and then in March of 2016. And then shortly after that, right after that, he joins the Trump campaign. And then as soon as the Access Hollywood tape comes out, we start to see the WikiLeaks document dump. Do you think that that was a coincidence? Because coincidences take a lot of planning, as Malcolm Nance likes to say. Now, the Ecuadorian intelligence agencies say that they have documented these visits. Because the truth is that Manafort was not logged in at the embassy on the official, login page, on the visitors page. But Ecuadorian intelligence says that they documented the visit in 2016, that it lasted 40 minutes. He was wearing sand-colored chinos, a cardigan, and a light shirt. Now, that's a lot of information for somebody who doesn't know anything, to put him in an outfit and to say how long he was there and blah, blah, blah. Shortly after that, Julian Assange emails, and this is something that we believe, Mueller has, because this has come out publicly, that Julian Assange emailed the GRU, the Russian intelligence agency, where the head of it just passed away at a young age. He died, like last week. But Julian Assange emailed the Russian intelligence, GRU. What did he email them about? He said he wanted the DNC material. And in mid-July, the GRU sent the DNC hacked material that they had hacked. And we know this because Mueller indicted them, and this stuff is in the indictment. That's why they call them speaking indictments, because he tells the story of these 12 intelligence operators working for the GRU in Russia hacking the emails. So in mid-July, the GRU sends the emails in an encrypted attachment to Julian Assange, to WikiLeaks. Shortly after that, they start to get the Access Hollywood tape, and they start dumping. And Trump is all over America doing his stupid rallies like he did last night in Mississippi, where it's Judgment Day. Did I mention you need to vote in Mississippi? It's Judgment Day. It's Judgment Day in Mississippi. If you vote the wrong way, it's going to be Judgment Day for Mississippi. It all depends how Mississippi votes today. However, in mid-July, the GRU sends the encrypted link to WikiLeaks, and then Trump starts on the campaign trail screaming, "I love WikiLeaks! I love WikiLeaks!" And then he says, "Russia, if you're listening, I hope you can find the 30,000 emails." What made him say Russia? And then last week, the prosecutors acknowledged to a judge in an unrelated case by accident that they copied and pasted criminal charges against Assange. So it appears Mueller has the goods.
Connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Now, I don't want you to think that the implications for what is going on between Manafort, Viktor Yanukovych's Ukraine, and Russia and Vladimir Putin is a small issue. The reason that the entire election was messed with by Putin is because he was afraid that if Hillary Clinton became president, somebody would hold him accountable for invading and annexing Crimea. You see what I mean? And obviously, there was some eye to eye, there was some agreement that Putin could reach with a guy like Donald Trump, who was out there preaching populism and the craziness of war, and that the United States would never, and blah, 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 and pulling us out of the, nuclear agreements with everybody, including Russia, right? Including Russia, and let Russia have a free hand in the world. And Trump hiring Paul Manafort was a direct signal to Putin that Trump was all in, regardless of whether or not they communicated, okay? The campaign changed the platform on Ukraine at the Republican National Convention to deny Ukraine lethal weapons to defend itself from Putin. And right at this very moment, and this is why people say, "Oh, Russia, it's the collusion thing." You know what? The truth has got to be told, because we're about to get World War III. I'm dead serious. Putin, after all this, after picking Trump would pull us out of NATO. After picking Trump would not prosecute Putin or go after Putin's assets or, do anything to enforce the Magnitsky Act or, do new sanctions on Russia. He might do, some things that looked like sanctions, but Putin would walk away scot-free. Putin would be still the richest man in the world. Putin would get his dream of Ukraine, which is what he wants. He wants Ukraine back in the Soviet Union. And I know people are going to say there is no Soviet Union, but that's the point. Putin wants one. And he wants Hungary back, and he wants Poland back, and he wants Ukraine back. And so you can see now, I hope, even though our news doesn't cover it completely, the international news channels do. And Putin is going to take Ukraine.
This is a major escalation, potentially, because you've seen Russian forces, according to the Ukrainian Navy, fire upon 3 naval vessels and then board them with a raiding party consisting of Russian special forces. The Ukrainian military says at least 6 of its naval personnel were injured in that confrontation. And it comes after another incident, which we've got video for now, which happened earlier in the day, of Russian patrol vessels trying but failing to intercept a number of Ukrainian vessels as they moved from the Black Sea through that very tight Kerch Strait into the Sea of Azov, where all these confrontations are currently taking place. One of the Russian ships actually rammed a Ukrainian naval tug, and you can see in that video there that tug in front of you and the Russian vessel approaching it eventually collides with it, but they weren't able to intercept them and to board those vessels. There's been another incident which has followed that, which has led to an actual firing on Ukrainian vessels, and so it's an immensely volatile situation that's unfolding in the strategic Kerch Strait, this strip of sea between the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea, between the Crimean Peninsula and mainland Russia. There's been reaction from the Ukrainians, of course. They've condemned it. The Ukrainian president has convened an urgent session of his war cabinet, and we're going to expect some pronouncements from that in the hours ahead. It's still in session now, even though it's well after, 2 o'clock in the morning in Kiev. And in Russia at the moment are approaching that time anyway. And there's been reaction from Western institutions. President Trump is said to be monitoring the situation. Yeah, right. That's according to Sarah Sanders, talking to CNN. And NATO, the Western military alliance, has issued a statement as well, saying it's monitoring it and calling for de-escalation and restraint.
They took 23 Ukrainian Navy guys. They have them. They have 23 of them. Putin is making his move. There is just no question. And Donald Trump will do absolutely nothing about it. And this is where world wars start, in this region of the world, in the Balkans, okay? It always starts there. And then the world is divided into teams. We're supposed to be with NATO. Trump hates NATO. If Ukraine is attacked, we're supposed to defend it. Ukraine is being attacked, and it will escalate now. This is really the end game of the Yanukovych era, of the Manafort wet dream, all for money. It was all for a little bit of money. It's all to protect the oligarchs. It's all to keep the Russian people guessing and wondering, and build up, nationalism in Russia while Putin steals. It's crazy, but that's what war is about. It's a racket, and you know it. So here was Nikki Haley at the emergency meeting at the United Nations.
We stand united in opposing Russia's attempt to discuss yesterday's serious escalation and in the Kerch Strait under an agenda item entitled Violation of the Borders of the Russian Federation. We strongly support Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders, extending to its territorial waters. We express our deep concern over the incident, which represent a dangerous escalation and violation of international law.
You're asking yourself, is this important? Yes.
Yes.
Very. That right there was U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, speaking at an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council today over the escalating crisis between Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, you'd be forgiven for not knowing that this is back in the news, but take a look at this video. Russia fired on and seized 3 Ukrainian Navy ships. This is a Russian ship about to ram into this tugboat. This video from Ukrainian authorities allegedly shows the moment that Russian vessel rammed into the Ukrainian boat. Ukraine is demanding that Russia release its ships and its sailors who are still being held.
All of this happened as the Ukrainian boats were sailing in the Kerch Strait, that is off the coast of Crimea, which of course was annexed by Russia back in 2014.
Look how narrow that is. That's the important part to see about the Kerch Strait.
Russia says it was forced to act because the Ukrainian boats illegally entered its territorial waters.
Which is, again, very complicated because it's a very, very narrow strait.
Yeah, and it's highly likely that the Russians didn't enter, that the Ukrainians didn't enter anything, and that the Russians decided to make their move. And this is exactly what Putin has always wanted. This is his wet dream. And, this is what he was afraid to have Hillary Clinton as the commander-in-chief. This is why he didn't want Hillary Clinton as commander-in-chief. This is a man who is running Russia as if it were his own personal playground. He is a mafia dude. He's, we think of Russia as a government, and you shouldn't. You should think of Russia as a mob. You should understand that Russia is run as the mafia. It is run as a racket. It is run as a like the Cosa Nostra. It's our thing. Russia is, all the money in Russia must be, given out to Putin's loyalists, and then they kick back to him the vig. That's how Russia is. That's what it does. And the people of Russia literally make $450 a month. And now he's going to get them, either they don't know, because I've been to Russia. And the last time I was in Russia when Putin was invading Ukraine, the first time. So I guess it was 2014. And I remember asking, you got to be very sneaky about it. People do not like to talk about politics in Russia. They're terrified. They pretend they're very strong and very tough, and they're very Russian, and they're very this and they're very that, while they eat, filka, which is just like a bigger than a sardine. It's just a little fish. It's like gray with black stripes. It's an ugly little fish. They put that on a piece of pumpernickel. They call it lunch. I'm not kidding. With 3 shots of vodka in various flavors. That's lunch. And they don't like to talk politics. So if you ask them if they like Putin, they go, You know what I mean? They won't say yes or no. They just go, whatever, it's Putin. But I asked some people who spoke English if they had anything to say or any thoughts or opinions about the invasion of Ukraine. And you know what? They did not know. They said, what are you talking about? I said, well, right now you're invading Ukraine. Oh, we haven't seen that on the state-run TV. We haven't seen that. We don't know anything about that. And I'm like, I can't read your newspapers because, it's in Cyrillic and I'm not good at that. And so, I know how to write my name in Cyrillic. That's what I know. It comes out looking like Panjay because an R is a P. Yeah, it's a weird language. But anyway, I said, it's not in your newspapers. No, it's not in our newspapers. It's not on your TV. No, it's not on our TV. So they didn't even know that their dear leader was invading an independent nation, a nation that had extricated itself from the old Soviet Union. This is where my people are from, okay? This is where our family is from. And I had to go back to see it. And when I went back to see it, they were invading it again. Isn't that interesting? And I believe it was so I could tell the story. That's why I was there at that time. But I'm telling you right now, this is how world wars start. This is exactly the part of the world where it happens. And this is a part of the world where half of the world is in NATO and the other half is not. And the people not in NATO are looking to destroy the alliance that has kept us from World War III all these many 70 years so that they can have a free hand in that region and conquer yet again and recreate the Soviet Union. And we have a president that is either the poodle of or in awe of or is being blackmailed by or owned by the leader of the world's mafia, Vladimir Putin. Trump thinks he's, a big Don. I mean, it's funny that's his name. But he thinks he's a big, Don and blah, blah, and he demands loyalty and an oath of omerta and nobody should talk. And you got some low-level, buttheads like Corsi and Stone. And some, players on the world stage like a Manafort has done so much that he was literally convicted of conspiracy to defraud the United States. That is what he stands convicted of. And then there are 10 charges that he pled guilty to in another trial and then entered into this plea deal. And, when he was on trial for the 8 counts that he was convicted on, he was witness tampering then. This man cannot tell the truth. He is either terrified of his life outside of the prison walls now, or he's hoping for a pardon by not ratting out his friends, and that Trump will give him back his property, $15 million worth. Do you know what I'm saying? Or he'd rather stay in jail because he's literally terrified. He knows that the head of the GRU died last week. He knows that John Brennan had a stroke. He knows what's going on. You might not, but they do. And he knows that the Russians have taken 23 Ukrainian Navy guys and 3 ships. And so does our president, who says nothing, doesn't warn them, doesn't tell them to back off, doesn't tell them to stand down, doesn't tell them to return these guys, doesn't tell them, the escalation is beyond belief and you got to tone it down, man. We're going to go into World War III. And I don't know if you know, but we're still part of NATO. For all my bloviating, we're still part of it. I don't know. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.